I found out my sweet grandmotherly neighbor, who I'd trusted with my house keys for years, was hiding cameras in my office and selling my professional secrets to my biggest rival to fund her secret lifestyle. The neighborhood of Willow Creek was the kind of place where people still left their back doors unlocked and shared sourdough starters over white picket fences. At 34, I felt lucky to have found a home here. As a freelance graphic designer, my life was a mix of frantic deadlines and the quiet peace of my home studio. It was my sanctuary, or so I thought. Then there was Mrs. Gable. Mrs. Gable lived 3 houses down. She was the person who brought over lemon bars when I moved in, and the one who had written a glowing recommendation for me years ago when I was just starting out. She was the neighborhood watch in the best way, always keeping an eye on things, watering my plants when I had to fly to the city for client pitches, and making sure my mail didn't pile up. "You're doing so well, Julia," she'd say, her eyes twinkling behind her spectacles as she handed me my spare key after a trip. "It makes me so proud to see a local girl making it big. Just don't work yourself too hard, dear. Family and peace are what matter." I believed her. I trusted her. I felt like I had a surrogate grandmother watching my back. I never questioned why she was so insistent on checking the humidity in my office, or why she always knew exactly when my biggest deadlines were. I just thought she cared. But 3 weeks ago, the peace began to crumble. I was working on the biggest project of my career, a full rebrand for a national organic food chain. It was the kind of contract that would set me up for the next 5 years. I had been working on the concepts for months, keeping them under a strict non-disclosure agreement, NDA. Everything was digital, encrypted, and locked in my home office. I was obsessed with the details, specifically a minimalist, hand-drawn leaf motif in a very specific shade of burnt ochre. When I went to the final pitch meeting in the city, I walked in with total confidence. I opened my portfolio to reveal my signature concept. The CEO of the company didn't look impressed. He looked disgusted. "Is this some kind of joke, Julia?" he asked, sliding a tablet across the table. "Our primary competitor, Green Roots, launched their new branding 4 hours ago. It's identical to yours, down to the hex code of the orange. Even the brush strokes on the leaf are a match." I felt the blood drain from my face. I stared at the screen. It was my work. Not just similar. It was my specific vision, something I hadn't even uploaded to a cloud server yet. I don't understand," I stammered. "I haven't shown this to anyone. My files are encrypted. I don't even use public Wi-Fi." "Well, clearly someone had eyes on it," he snapped. "The contract is void, and given the NDA, our legal team will be in touch to discuss how our trade secrets ended up in the hands of our biggest rival. You've just handed our competition the keys to our entire autumn campaign." I was fired, blacklisted, and facing a potential lawsuit that could bankrupt me before I hit 35. I drove home in a state of shock. I went straight to my office and checked my computer logs. No remote access. No malware. No suspicious logins. My digital fortress was intact. I sat in the middle of the room, my head in my hands, wondering if I was losing my mind. Had I sleep posted? Had I been hacked in a way I couldn't track? That evening, I sat on my porch, staring at the street, trying to figure out how someone could have seen my work. Mrs. Gable walked by, pulling her little wagon of gardening tools. "Oh, Julia, you're back early," she called out, her voice as sweet as ever. "How did the big meeting go? I was so rooting for you. I even lit a candle for your success." "It was a disaster, Mrs. Gable," I said, my voice cracking. "Someone stole my designs. I don't know how. I might lose everything." She clucked her tongue, her face a mask of sympathy. "Oh, you poor thing. People are so dishonest these days. But maybe it's a sign. Maybe you should take a break from all this stress. You look so tired, dear. Maybe it's time to settle down and find a simpler job." She walked away, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt a shiver of unease. There was something in her eyes, not pity, but a flicker of satisfaction. It was gone in a second, replaced by her usual grandmotherly squint, but the seed was planted. That night, I couldn't sleep. I started thinking about the times I had been away. Mrs. Gable had my key. She came in to water the fiddle leaf fig in my office every Tuesday and Friday. I decided to do something I felt guilty about. I went to a tech store the next morning and bought a professional-grade bug sweeper, a device that detects hidden radio frequencies. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself it was just the stress of the lawsuit making me hallucinate conspiracies. I started in the kitchen. Nothing. The living room. Nothing. Then I walked into my home office. The device began to chirp, a low, rhythmic pulse that grew louder as I moved toward my bookshelf, directly opposite my computer desk. I moved a stack of design history books, my heart thumping against my ribs. Tucked behind a first edition copy of The Elements of Style was a tiny black plastic cube. It was a high-definition 4K camera, disguised as a USB charger. It was plugged into an outlet I rarely used, angled perfectly to capture not just my face, but the entire surface of my computer monitors. I felt like I was going to throw up. I grabbed my laptop and plugged the camera's SD card into it. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. I scrolled through the files. There were hundreds of hours of footage. Me working, me talking on the phone with clients, me in my pajamas crying over a difficult project. But the most damning footage wasn't of me. It was of Mrs. Gable. In the videos, she wasn't watering plants. She was standing over my shoulder, taking photos of my screen with her phone. She was leafing through my physical sketchbooks. At one point, she even sat in my chair looking through my mail. And then I saw the video from 3 days ago. She was sitting at my desk on her own phone, and I could hear her voice clearly. "Yes, I have the final ochre drafts," she whispered into her phone. "The file names are Project Amber Final. I'll send the photos now. Make sure the transfer to my offshore account is cleared by Friday. I'm almost at the goal for the Florida condo." The sweet woman who brought me lemon bars was a corporate spy. I sat on my office floor for what felt like hours, the blue light of my laptop screen washing over me as I watched my life's work being systematically looted by a woman who had hugged me on my birthday. It wasn't just the designs, it was the commentary. In one clip, Mrs. Gable, this woman I called Auntie Bev when I was feeling sentimental, actually scoffed at a logo I had spent 3 weeks perfecting. She muttered, "Too busy, Julia. You always overthink it," before snapping a photo of the layout and texting it to God knows who. The betrayal was a physical weight. My chest felt tight, like I was trying to breathe through a straw. I had trusted her with my keys. I had trusted her with my life. When my mom passed away 2 years ago, Bev was the one who sat on my porch with me, holding my hand and telling me that I was stronger than I knew. Now I realized she was probably just scoping out my emotional state to see if I'd notice her stealing my ideas while I was grieving. I needed to call the police. That was the logical next step, right? But as I looked at the offshore account comment from the video, a cold realization set in. If I just called the cops, she'd wipe her phone. She'd claim she found the camera and was just checking on me because she was worried. Without proof of where that money went and who was paying her, I was still the one on the hook for the NDA violation. My career was still dead. I didn't need a police report. I needed leverage. I waited until the next morning. I didn't sleep. I just drank cold coffee and watched the street through my blinds. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the little green wagon appeared. Bev was out in her sun hat, deadheading her roses like she didn't have a care in the world. I walked out, my legs feeling like lead. I tried to keep my face neutral, but my hands were shaking in my pockets. "Morning, Bev," I called out. She looked up, beaming. "Oh, Julia, you're up early. Still stressed about that nasty business in the city?" "I was just thinking I should bring over some of that lavender tea. It's wonderful for the nerves." "I think I'm past tea, Bev," I said, walking toward her fence. I stopped just a few feet away. "I spent the night looking through some old files on my computer." She didn't blink. Her eyes stayed that soft, grandmotherly blue. "Oh, find anything helpful for your case?" "I found a video," I said, my voice dropping an octave. It was taken from a very specific angle in my office. "Behind the Elements of Style. You remember that book, don't you? You told me it was the Bible of design when you mentored me at my first internship. The change was subtle, but it was there." The twinkle in her eyes didn't vanish. It sharpened. It turned from a soft glow into a cold metallic glint. She stopped clipping the roses. "I don't know what you're talking about, dear. You've had a very hard week. Maybe you're hallucinating." "Hallucinating?" I pulled my phone out and hit play on a clip I'd cropped. It was the one of her sitting in my chair, talking about the offshore account in the Florida condo. I held the screen up so she could see her own face. The mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated. Bev didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She stood up straight, her back cracking slightly, and she looked at me with a level of contempt that made my blood run cold. "You were always so entitled, Julia," she said, her voice no longer sweet. It was raspy, bitter. "You think you made it because you're talented? I'm the one who put your name in at Miller's. I'm the one who spent 40 years in this industry only to be retired with a pathetic pension and a thank you plaque. I taught you everything. You owe me that condo." "I owe you?" "I paid you to watch my house. I bought you dinner every week." "Table scraps," she spat. "You're making 6 figures on a single rebrand, and you think a lasagna once a week makes us even?" "I'm 62 years old, Julia. I have nothing. You have everything. I just leveled the playing field. By giving my work to Green Roots? By destroying my reputation? Reputation is just ego," she said, stepping closer to the fence. "Green Roots paid me more for 3 photos than you've paid me in 3 years of friendship. If you go to the police, I'll tell them you were in on it. I'll say we split the money. Who are they going to believe? The sweet old lady who helped you start your career, or the ambitious girl who got caught breaking her NDA?" She smiled then, and it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. It was the smile of someone who had been playing a long game I didn't even know existed. "Go inside, Julia. Delete the video. We'll pretend this never happened, and I'll even help you find a nice, quiet job in a different field. Something with less stress? She turned back to her roses as if she hadn't just threatened to ruin my life a second time. I went back inside, my heart hammering against my ribs. She was right about one thing. The industry would eat me alive if they thought I was complicit. But she was wrong about me being weak. I went to my office and looked at the camera one more time. I realized something. If Bev was selling to Green Roots, she wasn't just a spy. She was a middleman. And middlemen always leave a paper trail. I wasn't going to the police. I was going to the one person who hated Green Roots more than I did. The CEO of the company that just fired me. But first, I had to see exactly how deep Bev's offshore account went. I grabbed the camera and started looking at the metadata of the files. I found a MAC address, a unique ID for the device she was using to upload the videos. It wasn't her phone. It was a dedicated hotspot. And according to the signal strength logs on the camera, that hotspot was still active. She wasn't just recording me, she was live streaming. In my opinion, guys. This part really highlights how some people justify their toxicity by convincing themselves they are owed something. It's a common trait in workplace and neighborly betrayals, the idea that your success is a direct theft from their potential. Finding out Bev was live streaming my life wasn't just a violation, it felt like having a parasite under my skin. Every move I'd made in this office, every private phone call to my doctor, every time I'd danced to music to blow off steam was potentially broadcast to a rival firm. I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced it down. I couldn't afford to be the victim anymore. I needed to be a technician. If the hotspot was still active, it meant Bev was still monitoring the feed. She probably had a tablet or a second phone hidden in that little green gardening wagon of hers. She was waiting to see if I'd fold, if I'd delete the footage like a good girl. Instead, I sat down at my desk. I made sure I was in clear view of the camera's original position, though I'd tucked the device into a pencil cup so she could only see my face and not the screen I was working on. I needed to perform. I opened a blank document and started typing in giant bold letters, "Retirement plan, the Green Roots deal." I leaned back, rubbing my temples, looking like a woman on the verge of a breakdown. Out of the corner of my eye, I watched the street. I saw Bev pause. She was standing by her hydrangea bush, her hand hovering near the pocket of her apron. She was checking the feed, hook, line, and sinker. While she was busy watching me panic, I was actually using my secondary laptop, the one the camera couldn't see, to trace the MAC address of that hotspot. I'm not a hacker, but I know enough about networking to see that the signal was bouncing off a local relay. It was registered to a Beverly G. at her home address. But here was the kicker. The data wasn't just going to a generic email. It was being uploaded to a shared Dropbox folder. I spent the next 4 hours doing something incredibly tedious. I stayed in character, sobbing occasionally or pacing the room, while my secondary laptop ran a script to brute force a guess at the shared link, using common naming conventions Bev might use. It was a long shot, but Bev was 62. She was tech-savvy, but she wasn't sophisticated. She liked patterns. At 2 p.m. I found it. The folder was named Project Legacy 2026. I clicked it, my breath catching in my throat. Inside were subfolders for every client I'd had in the last 2 years. Every logo, every color palette, every strategy deck I'd ever built was in there. But there was something else, a PDF titled Consulting Agreement. I opened it. It was a contract between Beverly Gable and the head of marketing at Green Roots. She wasn't just selling them my work. She was being paid a monthly consultancy fee of $3,000 to provide market insights from local talent. It was a legal paper trail. She had signed it with her real name. Just as I was about to download the entire folder, my front doorbell rang. My heart nearly jumped out of my ribs. I looked at my security camera app. It was Bev. She was holding a plate of lemon bars. "Julia, dear," she called through the door, her voice back to that sugary, grandmotherly lilt. I felt so bad about our talk earlier. I think the heat just got to me. "Can we talk? I've brought your favorites." She was checking on me. She'd seen me working on the retirement plan on the feed and wanted to see if I was actually going to play ball or if I was planning a counter-strike. I hid the secondary laptop under a sofa cushion and walked to the door. I opened it just a crack, keeping the chain on. "I'm busy, Bev," I said, my voice sounding appropriately ragged. "Oh, you look terrible, sweetheart," she said, squinting through the gap. She held up the lemon bars. "Let me in. Let's just fix this. I can call my contact at Green Roots. I can tell them I found a new version of the designs. We can save your reputation together." She was trying to lure me into being an accomplice. If I agreed to fix it with her, I'd be just as guilty as she was. Then she'd really own me. "I'll think about it," I said, my eyes darting to her apron pocket. I could see the rectangular outline of a phone. "I just need a few hours." "Don't take too long," she whispered, her smile not reaching her eyes. The world moves fast, Julia, and some bridges, once they're burned, stay black forever. She left the plate on the porch and walked away. I didn't touch the lemon bars. I went back to my office. I downloaded every single file from that Dropbox folder, the contract, the logs, the photos of my screen. Then I did something bold. I uploaded a new file to her Dropbox folder. It was a video file titled Message for Green Roots Legal. Inside was a 30-second clip of me holding the hidden camera, looking directly into the lens and saying, "I have the contract. I have the MAC address. I have the footage of your consultant stealing my trade secrets. You have 1 hour to call off the lawsuit and issue a public statement that my work was stolen, or this entire folder goes to the Federal Trade Commission and the press." I hit sync and waited. 5 minutes later, I saw Bev through the window. She was standing in the middle of her lawn staring at her phone. Her face wasn't pale, it was purple. She looked like she was having a stroke. She turned and looked directly at my house, her eyes filled with a raw, primal rage. She started running toward my front door, and she wasn't carrying lemon bars this time. Hello, guys, in my opinion, there is nothing scarier than a person who thinks their age or mentor status gives them a license to steal your future. Bev's transition from lemon bars to a legal threat is the ultimate mask-off moment. The sound of Bev's footsteps pounding up my porch steps was a rhythmic thud that made my heart hammer against my teeth. This wasn't the slow, graceful shuffle of the woman who deadheaded roses. This was the heavy, frantic gait of someone who realized their life was about to implode. I barely had time to double-lock the deadbolt before the door handle began to rattle violently. "Julia, open this door!" Her voice was no longer a lilt, it was a screech that scraped the air. "You think you're so clever? You think you can threaten me? I made you! I built your career!" I stood in the hallway clutching my phone, my finger hovering over the emergency call button. "Go home, Bev. It's over. I've sent the files to my own cloud. Even if you break in and take my laptop, the truth is already out." The rattling stopped. For a second, there was a silence so heavy I could hear the wind whistling through the screen door. Then a soft, chilling thud. She had leaned her forehead against the wood of the door. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice cracking with a terrifying kind of desperation. "I put everything into that condo. I've lived in this drafty, miserable house for 40 years, watching people like you come and go, buying new cars, taking vacations I could never afford. I deserve a quiet life. I deserve to be comfortable. By stealing mine?" I shouted back, my anger finally overriding my fear. "You didn't just take money, Bev. You took my peace. You sat in my house, drank my coffee, and watched me cry while you were the one causing the pain. That's not a retirement plan, it's sociopathic." "It's survival!" she screamed, kicking the door. "Open it! Let's talk like adults. I can delete the contract. I can tell them it was all a mistake." "No more lies, Bev. I've already sent the video to Greenroot's legal team." The clock is ticking. I heard her scramble off the porch. I ran to the window and pulled the curtain back just an inch. She was standing on the sidewalk, frantically typing on her phone, her chest heaving. She looked small, old, and incredibly dangerous. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It wasn't Bev. It was a restricted number. "This is Marcus Thorne," the voice said. I recognized it immediately. He was the CEO of the organic food chain that had fired me 2 days ago. "Julia, I just received an interesting email, along with a video that I'm assuming was meant for Greenroots." "Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice trembling. "I have the proof. I have the contract. I was never part of this." "I see that," he said, his tone shifting from cold to professional. "Our legal team is currently on a conference call with Greenroots. Apparently, their head of marketing didn't realize their consultant was actually a neighbor with a hidden camera. They're panicking, Julia. They're looking at a massive corporate espionage suit." "What does this mean for me?" "It means the lawsuit against you is being dropped immediately," Thorne said. "And the contract for the rebrand? It's back on the table. But on one condition, I want every scrap of data you have on that woman. We're going to make an example out of her." I looked out the window. Bev was back on her porch, sitting in her rocking chair, staring blankly at my house. She looked like she had finally realized that the bridge wasn't just burned, it was gone. "I'll give you everything," I said. But as I hung up, I felt a strange hollow sensation. I had won. My career was safe. My house was mine. But I realized I couldn't live here anymore. Every time I looked at the bookshelf, I'd see the space behind the books. Every time I walked past the roses, I'd see a spy. I started packing a bag. I needed to get out of the house for a few nights. As I walked to my car, Bev stood up from her chair. She didn't move toward me. She just watched. "You won't last," she called out, her voice eerily calm now. "This industry, it'll find someone else to record you, Julia. It's not just me. Everyone is watching. Everyone wants what you have." I didn't answer. I got in the car and drove. But in my rearview mirror, I saw something that made my skin crawl. Bev wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the house next to hers. A young couple had just moved in last month, and as I turned the corner, I saw her pick up a small wrapped plate of lemon bars. She wasn't stopping. She was just starting over, in my opinion. The scariest part of this isn't the initial betrayal, it's the lack of remorse. When someone like Bev decides they're the victim, they feel justified in repeating the crime until they get what they want. She isn't a broken woman. She's a predator who just lost her current hunting ground. I stayed at a hotel that night, but I didn't sleep. I spent the hours staring at the ceiling, the sound of Bev's voice on the recording playing on a loop in my head. I just leveled the playing field. It's funny how people who do the most damage always frame it as some kind of social justice for themselves. The next morning, the fallout went from a private war to a public execution. Marcus Thorne's legal team worked with terrifying speed. By 10 a.m., the local news was running a story about corporate espionage in Willow Creek. They didn't name me, thank God, but they named the firm and mentioned a local resident acting as a mole. The industry blogs were even more brutal. Greenroots' head of marketing resigned, which is corporate speak for being thrown out of a window, and their stocks took a nosedive. I drove back to the neighborhood around noon to get the rest of my things. I expected a scene. I expected more screaming or maybe even the police. What I found was much quieter and somehow worse. Bev was sitting on her front porch. Her little green wagon was overturned on the lawn. Two men in suits, likely investigators from the food chain, were carrying boxes out of her house. She just sat there in her rocking chair, clutching a sweater around her shoulders, staring at nothing. She looked like a ghost. I parked my car and started loading my monitors and gear. I tried to ignore her, but the silence between our houses was deafening. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was thin, like paper tearing. "They're taking my computer, Julia. They're taking the house. The lawyers say I'll be lucky to avoid jail time." I stopped, a heavy monitor in my arms. I didn't feel the triumph I thought I would. I just felt exhausted. You did this to yourself, Bev. You chose the camera over the friendship. You chose the money over the person who looked up to you. She turned her head slowly, looking at me with those cold, hollow eyes. I chose me. For once in 62 years, I chose me. And look where it got me. Back in a drafty house with people in suits taking my things. You chose a shortcut, I snapped. You were my mentor. I would have helped you. If you had told me you were struggling, I would have found a way to support you. But you didn't want help. You wanted to win at my expense. She let out a short, dry laugh. Help? From a girl who thinks a leaf motif is the peak of human achievement? You don't know what the world is really like, Julia. You're still playing with crayons. I was playing for keeps. I didn't say another word. I finished packing. I saw the young couple from the house next door standing on their lawn, watching the investigators. The wife looked at Bev with an expression of pure horror. The lemon bars Bev had left on their porch earlier were still there, sitting on the railing, untouched. The grandma of the block was dead. The neighborhood watch was over. As I pulled out of my driveway for the last time, I saw my mother's old hydrangea bush, the one Bev had promised to look after. It was wilted. I realized then that she had probably never watered it. She'd only ever used it as a reason to be near my windows. In my opinion, guys, this ending feels right because in real life, these confrontations aren't usually cinematic. They're just sad. Bev didn't have a change of heart, and Julia didn't get a happily ever after in that house. The reality of betrayal is that even when you win, you still lose the place where you felt safe. The predator is caught, but the garden is still ruined.